let's go talk about the violin, the peaceful violin. So tell us how that, I guess we all believe in being vessels and how we can just create things we cannot even imagine that we can deliver. How was that episode for you? Waking up in the middle of the night and just,
I literally heard a voice and it said, Patrick, I want you to make a violin and it'll become the symbol of peace for the entire world. And I'm not a musician, I'm not an instrument maker. I had no idea at all how to do anything like that. And so I actually spoke out loud to the voice and I said, I'll go to the library and I'll get a book and try to learn how to make a violin. And the voice said, I don't want you to learn how to make a violin. I just want you to follow my voice. And many things happened, but the first piece of wood for the back was from a war in the Congo. And indigenous people gifted it to me for helping them with a conflict. And I didn't know what I was going to do with this piece of wood. Then Native Americans in California, I helped them with conflict, and they had a tree they called the Tree of Peace, where 200 and something tribes would come over several hundred years to resolve their conflicts. And one time when I came, lightning struck the tree and a giant branch fell down. And somehow I came to see that there was a correlation between the people of Africa that I'd helped stop conflict, and the Tree of Peace was stopping conflicts. And so I started to make a violin. And to make a long story short, the violin is made out of over 100 fragments of wars and conflicts over about 3,000 years of history. And to give you an idea what I mean by that, for example, I went to the place where the Buddha gave his first sermon and just ran into the person who was responsible for the place. And he says, this brick little heart right here is where the Buddha stood and gave his first sermon, and a piece of the brick popped right off. And so I picked it up and I made it like part of the violin. And in the violin are many different things like that, connecting to stuff all over. My grandfather was one of the couple of people who was given the order by the President of the United States to assess the damage at Hiroshima right after they dropped the atomic bomb. And the first people he met were some children whose parents, they say, turned to dust in front of them. And my grandfather scooped up the remains of the dust and other parts from the atomic bomb, and he brought it home. So it was sitting on our family mantle for, 70 years or something like that. And I knew all the story about it. At the same time, the Buddhists by this time had made me the world inner peace ambassador for Buddhism. And I wasn't even a Buddhist. And thousands of monks came and honored me, and I was there, and a chief, the head chief, what they called the grand chief of the Anishinaabe people, nation in the United States and Canada border, came to me and said he was carrying the ashes of the white buffalo from the white buffalo prophecy, and that the ashes had spoke to him and told him to bring the ashes and give them to me, so that I would be able to carry them and speak to elders of indigenous traditions who would not normally speak to me otherwise. So I took the ashes from Hiroshima, and I took the ashes of the white buffalo, and I took all kinds of other sacred things, and I made the varnish for the violin out of that, with the idea, and also the first brick to build the ovens at Auschwitz, and things like that. So that the voices of all those people who'd been destroyed in conflicts around the world could speak out and say, let's not do this, let's have peace. And then the most unique thing happened on the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, on the floor of the UN, the messengers of peace of the United Nations blessed the violin and officially recognized it as a symbol of peace for the whole world. And I left one little piece out that's important. The violin sounded horrible. And I'm not a violinist or anything, but it just sounded horrible. And I was so embarrassed, I kept it in the bathroom because I didn't want people to see it. And then I got invited to be one of the 4 saints that was going to bless the Ganges River for 100 million people to clean their karma. And so part of that blessing was I asked, and the people could see with drones and flat screen TVs for 50 miles around, to say peace in their language. And I brought the violin, and when they did that, I put the entire violin standing in the middle of the Ganges River, under the river, with 100 million people saying peace in their languages. And it took months for the violin to dry out, and when it did, it took on the sound of a master's violin. And then it was toured the world and was blessed hands-on by over 1 million people. And so that's the violin story.
But like sporadically I'd have to take like a month, 2 months off. And the reason is because it's stories like this, but imagine hearing stories like that, just like thousands of these stories, and your brain just gets like fried. You're just like, because it's remarkable and insane, and just all the things. Anyways, yeah, it was overwhelming, the amount of stories, and I get asked, what about things that I left on the cutting room floor. I mean, you can't include all the details of stories, like this. But it's like countless of these stories. And so what I would always tell myself is like, man, whatever happens in this movie, at least like this was one hell of like a learning experience.
And it gets often answered, and that is, where are things now and what's happened? Because this started some time ago, and then it's been some time since he finished shooting it, a long editing process, which I also want to share. I was not allowed to see the film, nor know anything that he'd filmed for the entire time till the very end. I saw the film for the first time actually on a screen at the previous screening. And so it was quite an experience for me to see my own film. And I laughed and I cried and I felt spiritually touched. And, so it's a great film. He's a master. But what has happened to this point is the indigenous peoples from all across the Americas, from South America, Central America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, through the work that I've been doing, came together and are creating the Indigenous Confederation of the Americas, and them joined with other indigenous peoples from some other places around the world have come together to create a constitution which we're going to present to the United Nations for them to become an independent nation like the Sami people did. They're the only people that don't have an actual country. They're like across 4 or 5 countries. And in the signing of that document and coming together, I had the privilege of bringing together with other people than just me, but primarily led by me, over 60 million indigenous people. So it turned into something really big. And I didn't know I was going to do that. I'm just a regular guy, trying to do something, and something profound happened.